So the other day I was riding my bike home from school, and there's this girl in front of me who's also riding a bike. And she's talking on her phone, texting, checking it constantly, and obviously not paying attention. So as you guys can guess, she fell pretty hard. It's not really a good thing, but I mean, the amazing thing about it though was that her phone never left her ear. Even as she was tumbling on the ground and stuff, she was still right there on her ear. And then she even ignored me when I asked if she was okay, because she was still talking. That leads me to my main argument that society, today's society needs to free themselves from their phones. And I bet most of us spend a significant amount of time texting, talking, surfing the web on our phones on a daily basis. And to be honest, it's a decent form of entertainment. But in fact, spending too much time on our phones can have negative effects on our health. It can create reckless behavior, and at times it can strain relationships. So cell phones and their effects on the human body has been a hot topic for many years. Some scientists have said that there's no significant effects on our bodies, but others have claimed that the small amount of radiation that are emitted from the phones can affect our brain in negative ways. And in an interview with NPR, Dr. Nora Volkow, an author for the Journal of the American Medical Association, said, "We use positron emission tomography to measure brain glucose metabolism, which serves as an indicator of brain function because when the brain is activated, glucose metabolism goes up. And what we found was when we compared images of the brain when subjects had their cell phones, the right cell phone activated versus when they didn't have their cell phones activated. And we found that there was a significant increase in brain glucose metabolism in the area of the brain in the antenna, which indicates that indeed the human brain is sensitive to electromagnetic radiation emitted from cell phones. And it's inconclusive whether or not this radiation can lead to long-term health effects, but it is certain that our brain is sensitive to the exposure. And I personally believe that decreasing the amount of time we spend on the phones is worth the sacrifice, considering the potential harm that could be done to our brains. Okay, and constantly being on our phones can also lead to reckless behavior. An example of this is texting and driving. Recent tests have shown that texting and driving is actually more dangerous than driving a car. And they've also shown that when a driver texts, his or her reaction time goes down by 35%. Steering capability goes down by 91%. And the driver is 23 times more likely to get into a car crash while texting and driving. And the National Safety Council also released a study that said 28% of traffic accidents occur when people talk on cell phones or text messages while driving. So if we could just realize that we don't have to respond to those text messages right away or answer our phones while we're in the car, we can make the road that much safer. And this all goes back to the fact that people need to free themselves from their phones, because if we truly were free, we wouldn't have the urge to risk our lives and those around us in order to send a 5-word message. I can't necessarily blame people for being so self-oriented, because the technology is so amazing. I mean, we can get on the internet whenever we want. We can talk to anybody, anywhere. And that's pretty revolutionary. But I do feel that constantly being connected can take away from relationships. At times, we spend way too much time talking to our phones instead of talking to people that are around us. We're probably more interesting than whatever it is we're doing on the phone. An example of this is on the TV show Curb Your Enthusiasm. Jerry Seinfeld was talking with Julie Louis-Dreyfus, and she pulled out her BlackBerry mid-conversation, and Jerry asked her if it would be okay if he pulled out a magazine and read it instead of talking to her, because there's really no difference in that. And he also did a bit on Conan O'Brien's show where he said, when he was talking about BlackBerry users, he said they always hold it in their hands because this is what BlackBerry commands them to do. And they listen to what you're saying, and then they compare it with what the BlackBerry says. And they think, which is really more entertaining to me? And I think there's more buttons on this phone than on your face. So obviously Seinfeld's take on cell phones is the most credible. But I think he gets the point across when it comes to cell phones and how they affect relationships in a humorous way. So I'm not saying that we should completely get rid of cell phones altogether because that's not reasonable. But what I am saying is that we should limit our usage. If we were able to do this, we would decrease the exposure to radiation, potentially save lives by not texting and driving, and finally maintain better human relationships.
Brian, what did you think?
A good story in the beginning, the girl that fell down, and there was a good citation from NPR. Good evidence to support the claim, but look down at the notes a lot. We're talking. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the story at the beginning also. The way you presented it could be enhanced if you were talking to us a little bit more instead of reading so much. And that becomes a problem during a lot of the presentation. If I'm listening to you, it's not too bad, but every time I look up, I see you looking down, and it just is really, it takes us out of the relationship here, and it feels more like you're just kind of conveying an essay to us rather than telling us what you think and how you feel. I thought you did a good job identifying your topic early on. You have an excellent setup of what the secondary claims are going to be, so all the structural stuff is in good shape. Your proof on the health effects of the cell phone seemed to be a little scanty. You acknowledge that yourself. You talk, well, it's just potential risks. I think your stronger arguments are on the other issues, particularly the problem with texting and driving or talking on the phone. I think that you do a pretty good job showing the risk factors there, and you actually have good data on those particular points. The examples on the last point concerning the social niceties, you have the humorous examples from Jerry Seinfeld on the television show. It would be interesting to find how widespread that kind of behavior is. I'm not sure that it is infrequent, but there ought to be some way to measure it, and maybe you could also use a personal example to show how frustrating it is. This is one of those things that, as the world changes, we get new things going on. It's going to affect the way people communicate, and it is kind of funny that you see people texting each other when they're sitting across the table from each other. And I'm wondering, really? Is that necessary? I get emails from people in the office area right across the hall, and I just thought, well, why didn't you just stick your head out the door and say, hey, Richard, I got a question? Instead, I'm getting an email on those kinds of things. In your situation, you're talking about it being the phone, and of course that's all makes it even more ubiquitous. I think your facial expressions when you're talking are a little more involved. You do seem animated, but you are shifting around a little bit, and you never seem as comfortable as you ought to be at this point speaking to the audience. All right, thank you.